much for liking the page. Thank you for all the engagement that I got on my last post. I really appreciate it. I was blown away, over 300 likes and loves, so I really appreciate that. Thank you so much. All right, so I'm going live from my main page. I'm going live from my TV network media page, so I'll be looking at both. And I'm going to break down today the SEC eastern side of the conference. Okay, so what I'm going to do, I'm going to start. I've got my notes here. I'm going to start from the bottom, and I'm going to work my way up. So I'm going to start from the bottom at 7th place. Say a little bit about why I'm picking each team in that position. Talk a little bit about what they have, what I believe they'll do, coaching changes, players you may not have heard of that may make an impact, players that maybe you have heard of that I believe may really make a name for themselves. Just you guys are going to see. So we'll start at the bottom. Like I said, I'm breaking down the SEC East. At the bottom, I've got the Missouri Tigers. So I want to make sure you guys can see this. Can you see that, Amanda?
Mm-hmm.
Mizzou is what I'm going to put. So Mizzou, I've got Missouri. Can you guys see that? Let me know if you can see that. So I've got Missouri at the bottom. Missouri, they've got 8 coming back on offense, and then they've got, I believe, 3 coming back on defense. I will start with the offense first. That's on the bright side for Missouri. I have them finishing last. I believe they're going to be a pretty good football team. They're going to win 4 out of their 5 games. 4 of the wins are going to come out of conference. I believe that's what I have at least. Offensively, they have their quarterback returning, who's really good. Josh Heupel's the offensive coordinator there. Barry Odom took over as head coach after Gary Finkel, and he is a defensive-minded coach. So he had to put an offensive coordinator in place, and he put Josh Heupel in place, and it worked out well. Their quarterback, Drew Lock, is going to be really good. I believe he'll be good. I believe they're going to score a ton of points. That won't be a problem for Missouri. The problem, I believe, will be on the defensive side of the ball. They got a really good wide receiver. His name's Jamon Moore. I'm sure anybody that watches college football knows who Drew Lock and Jamon Moore are. By the way, everything that I'm going off of is based on what Street and Smith and Lindy's say. I kind of agree with Athlon a lot, so I didn't use them as kind of a gauge. So everything I'm going with is Street and Smith and Lindy's. So back to Missouri, on offense, I believe they're going to be very good. They scored a lot of points last year. As a matter of fact, I think there was one game, I don't remember who it was against, but they scored 37 points and lost by 26. So think about what I just said. They scored 37 and lost by 26. I think the final was 73-37. I don't remember who it was, but they can definitely score. On defense, though, is where I definitely think they'll have some problems. At running back, they've got Crockett back, Demario Crockett. He rushed for 1,000 yards last year. He'll do it again probably this year. So the offense will be good. On defense is where, like I said, they're probably going to have the most problems, and there's a lot of reasons for that. And it's kind of a surprise because in 2015, they had one of the best units in the country on defense. They played a lot of 9-7, 13-10, 7-3 type games in 2015. That was when Pinkel was a coach. He left Odom in, who was a defensive-minded guy, but they lost a lot of talent on defense. So they've got a lot of holes, and they still do. I believe that Barry Odom's a couple years away, maybe 1 year or 2 years away before Missouri's relevant again. So on defense, they're like the way they play, and I think this is a lot of the reason why they aren't very good. There is a lot of holes, but they play like a read and react type of defense. And when you play a read and react type defense, you have to have you got to have quick players. You got to have smart. Got to have smart players, and there's a lot of that old personnel left over. So he's only in his 2nd year with his guys. So it's kind of a personnel issue on that side of the ball, as well as just having gaps on all three levels, up front, at linebacker, and in the secondary. So to summarize everything, I think that 4 out of their 5 wins will definitely be out of conference. I have them going 1-7 in the SEC. Would not be surprised if they went 0-8. The 5 wins I have coming at home against Missouri State. I have them beating Purdue at home. I have them beating Idaho at home, and I have them beating UConn on the road. And then I have them winning 1 game, and that's against UT. And the only reason that I have them beating Tennessee, I have Tennessee finishing way ahead of them, but I have them beating Tennessee because they're going to be making a late bowl push. They'll be sitting at 4-5 when they play UT. They get them at home, and before it's their season finale at home. They go on the road at Vandy and at Arkansas. So they're 4-5. They're trying to make a bowl push. They get UT at home as their home finale. I have them beating them 5-5 and then dropping the last 2 on the road and finishing 5-7. They won't go to a bowl. And 1-7 in conference. Dead last in the SEC East. So that's Missouri. Can you guys see that? So Missouri finishes last in the SEC East. They go 5-7. 4 of their 5 wins come out of conference. And they beat UT in their home finale. And I wouldn't be surprised if UT beat them there. Most teams, especially at 4-5, they're trying to make a late bowl push. There will be a huge turnout because it'll be senior day, home finale. It'll probably be a shootout, but Missouri beats UT to get 1 conference win. They go on the road. They lose to Vandy. They lose to Arkansas. And Barry Odom does not go bowling in his second year. Behind them, in a close race, I have Vanderbilt. A lot of people are talking a lot about Vanderbilt and the potential that they have this year. I love Derek Mason. I love what he's doing. He's recruiting well. They went bowling last year for the first time in a few years. And I like what he's doing. I'll summarize that after I get done talking about the positives and the negatives. Vandy returns 8 on offense, and they return 7 on defense. So they have 15 starters coming back, which is always good, especially in the SEC. When you've got 15 guys returning, that's always good. So I've got Vandy finishing 6th. Now, I had tied for 5th. I don't know exactly how, and maybe I should know this, but I don't know exactly how they break that down. If you have 2 teams sitting at, say, 6-6, but 2-6 in the conference, I don't know if they go to the tiebreaker, as opposed to putting a team, like say Vandy goes 5-7, 1-7, but they beat Missouri. Does that make them 6th, or does that make them tied for 7th? So I'm just going to put 6th because I do have Vanderbilt beating them. And on the bright spot, I could talk about Derek Mason. I could talk about their bowl appearance last year. All that's great. The recruiting's great. They've got 15 starters coming back. All that's good. But there's a very big reason why I think they're going to finish 6th. When you look at their schedule, it's brutal. Brutal schedule. And Vandy, even though they've got 15 guys coming back, they've always had issues with depth. They play very physical. They always play good defense. But it's hard to get a bunch of smart, talented kids. Just kind of like Notre Dame. It's hard to get a bunch of smart, talented kids and go deep with it. In the SEC, you have to have depth. You have to. You're going to get beat up, period, point blank. They're going to lose some guys with this gauntlet of a schedule that they have about midway. There's a 6-game stretch between September 16th and October 28th. That is brutal. This is what they have. Starting on September 16th, they've got Kansas State coming to Nashville. Kansas State, we'll talk about Kansas State when I go over the Big 12, but Bill Snyder has gone ahead and announced that it's going to be his last year. If there's any team that I want to win the Big 12, it's Kansas State. What better story tale ending would it be for Kansas State to go out and Bill Snyder win, if anything, their side of the Big 12 and show up in the Big 12 championship? That'd be great. We'll talk about the Big 12 when I cover the Big 12. So Kansas State comes to Nashville. I think I have them sitting 2-0. Kansas State beats them. Then after Kansas State, let's see here. After Kansas State, who do they have? They've got Bama coming to Nashville. So they're at Kansas State and Bama back-to-back at home. Then, so they're nice and beat up. Kansas State's physical, Bama's physical. So they're already a little beat up. Then they go on the road to the Swamp to play Florida. They lose there. And then they go on the road. Georgia comes there. So they play Kansas State at home, Alabama at home, go on the road to play Florida in the Swamp, come home to play Georgia, and then they go back-to-back at Ole Miss and at South Carolina. Man, there's just Vanderbilt is, like I said, I like Derek Mason. I like what they're doing. They play tough. They will be competitive. Quote me on that. They will be competitive in their games. I just don't think that they will add on to what they did last year. At best, I think I have them going 6-6 with that 6-game stretch. I have them going 0-6, 1-5 at best, and that win would probably come at Ole Miss. I just don't see them play. Even though it's at home, they're definitely not going to beat Bama. Kansas State, I just don't see it. So they're sitting at 2-6. They win a few, and then they go on the road to end the year, and I have them finishing up 5-7 and 2-6 in the conference. I don't know who I have them beat. Let me take a look. Kyle Shermer returns at quarterback. That's a positive. You know, I could talk about a lot of things, but at the end of the day, Kyle Shermer threw for 9 touchdowns last year. They've got to, if Vandy's going to improve on what they did last year, they've got to start throwing the ball and opening it up for the running game. They've got a loaded backfield. They've got good backfields. They have depth at running back. They just don't have any threat to pass. Maybe they change that year. If they do, that'll make them a little more competitive. Ralph Webb's the running back that's really good there. So 5-7, 2-6 is how I have them finishing. Good for 6th place. 6th place or tied for 5th. I don't know. So Vandy is in 6th place. In 5th place, I've got the Kentucky Wildcats. Kentucky Wildcats will be... I have them finishing 5th. And when I'm done, I need to tighten down this board. So Kentucky, I have finishing 5th. I love Stoops and what he's doing. He's recruiting good. It's another team, though, that's kind of like Missouri in a way. They're a year or two away, in my opinion. They've gotten some JUCO guys. Missouri has gotten some JUCO guys. From experience, from me watching, junior college route is not going to win games in the SEC. And that's in my opinion. You've got to build a foundation. You've got to get freshmen. You got to redshirt them. You got to get them strong. And if they play as sophomores, they must be really talented. So just like Vandy, you know, I could talk about last year's progress. A lot of people are talking about Kentucky being in the top 3. I'm going against the grain. A lot of people are saying Kentucky could be that team that surprises a lot of people. And that could happen. They could go 8-4. I don't think that'll happen. I believe I have them at 6-6. We'll find out here in a minute. They'll be good on offense again, I believe. The gaps will probably come on the defensive side. Their quarterback comes back, who's really good. But again, there's a scheduling. When I look at their schedule, there's just games that I circle that I just believe that they can't win. Either they can't win. If they do win, they'll be so beat up the next week because they're back to back to back. The SEC is so brutal when it comes to that. You just have to have depth. But to the schedule, I have them opening up 2-0, and then they go to South Carolina, where I believe they'll lose. They'll lose to South Carolina, Williams-Brice Stadium. I believe it's a night game. South Carolina has their quarterback coming back. I believe they're going to be pretty good on defense. They have some guys returning. We'll talk about South Carolina in a second. But I have them starting 2-0, losing to South Carolina on the road. Then they come home to play Florida. And that Florida game is really a make-or-break game, in my opinion, for Kentucky. It really is a make-or-break game. If they could somehow upset Florida, that could change the entire complexion of their season. They do get them at home. I just don't think they can do it. I have Florida beating them. Then after that, they play Missouri,
they beat Missouri at home. I have them beat Missouri, and then they play Eastern Michigan at home, which I have them beaten, and so they're sitting at 4-2. Then they go to Mississippi State. They play at home versus UT, where I do have them pulling off an upset, and then they let down against Ole Miss, and then they lose at Vandy and at Georgia. Kentucky, like I said, I love what they're doing. I love Mark Stoops. He came from Arizona, I believe 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. They're just a year or two away from really having that breakthrough type of season. If you're going to have a breakthrough season, SEC East is definitely the side that you want to be on. It's a little bit more watered down. The West is just the West is crazy, especially on the top end when you talk about Alabama, Auburn, and LSU. So I have them going 6-6. They will go back to a bowl, and just to kind of summarize a little bit, I do believe they have some talent. I don't remember exactly. I think they have 8 coming back on offense and 8 on defense. So Kentucky's one of those teams where I have them at 6-6, and I believe 2-6 if I'm not mistaken. But they could go 8-4. That Florida game, I believe, in the 4th week could be a make or break game for them. So I have them finishing 5th, 6-6, and 2-6 in the SEC. I believe with their wins coming against, I don't remember who I have them beating. It's kind of irrelevant, but do quote me. A lot of people are talking about Kentucky. In Media Day, they were talking about them. The talent's definitely there. They've got a good quarterback. They've got a really good backfield that's deep. It's just a defense thing, and it's a depth thing with me. In SEC, you got to have depth. You got to include the fact that injuries are going to take place. When they take place, do they have the guys that they can plug in, like a Georgia, like a Florida, like an Alabama, like an Auburn, like an LSU? And the answer is no, they're just not there yet. They're not there yet. All right, so 4th, so I've got Kentucky finishing 5th, 6-6, 2-6 in conference, and 4th I've got UT. I've got Tennessee finishing 4th. And a lot of people might not agree with this. I've seen them as high as 2. The consensus has them around 3. I've got them at 4, and I'm about to explain why. David Dobbs is gone for one. I'll start there. Last year was the opportunity that Tennessee had, man. If there was ever an opportunity Tennessee had to get back to the top of the SEC East and go back to Atlanta, it was last year. I believe they were sitting 5-0, 6-0. And then, I believe almost got into the top 10, if not into the top 10, and then they kind of fell off. They lost their quarterback. They lost some other guys. But I will start by saying last year when they crumbled, it kind of showed it showed me that they have a lack of depth. And then, this year there's just question marks at quarterback. They've got a few options who I'll get into. But it's definitely a new look. There's always an adjustment period, and their schedule is very tough as well. There's gaps on all 3 levels of the defense. Up front, they're relying very heavily on Jonathan, I believe Kongbo is his name. He's a junior college transfer. He's been beat up since the spring. Since he showed up in the spring, they've been beat up. He's been beat up, but they're relying very heavy on him to provide a pass rush. And then they do get their anchor back on defense, Garen Kirkland, who was out, I believe, about half of the season last year. And then in the defensive backfield, they're definitely young. They do have a couple good safeties, which is a bright spot on the defense. But if your safeties are the bright spot of the defense, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing. I really don't. If your free safety and your strong safety are the strong part of your defense, that tells me a lot. That tells me that up front and in the front 7, it just isn't there. If your safeties are making all the tackles, you've got problems. So, and I expect that to continue this year, especially when they get into SEC play. This is what their schedule looks like real quick. I do have them losing in the swamp. They play. Let's see here. I may be wrong about that. Hold on one second, guys.
You guys hang with me. I hope you're enjoying the show. I know this is very long. I know everybody might not be a football fan. This is what I'm passionate about. Hopefully you can hear it in my voice. Hopefully you can see it. And eventually, as time goes by, when people start to realize this is what I'm doing, I can find my crowd, I can find my audience, and drive them in. For everybody that's hanging in, I really appreciate you hanging in with me. We're talking SEC East football. So far, I've got Missouri 7th, Vandy 6th, Kentucky 5th, and I'm at Tennessee 4th. I'm wrapping up Tennessee now, if you're just now joining in. And I have Tennessee, talk a little bit about their offense. They got a new look at quarterback. The running back, John Kelly, they got another guy. Neither one of them started last year. I'm sure they'll be fine. Running backs, you kind of just plug in and out. But I just don't see UT breaking that ceiling, getting into the top two. It consistently seems to be the same two teams over and over. So let's see here. Let me find out. Oh, to summarize on UT real quick. Hold on, I'm lost here for a second. Hold on a second, guys. Y'all hang with me. I'll find where I'm at. Here we go. So I look at the schedule. It's brutal. They do play at the Swamp. They also play at Alabama. I have them losing both of those. And they get LSU and Georgia at home, but I just don't think that they can beat them. So they go on the road to play Florida in the Swamp. They go on the road to play Bama. They get Georgia and LSU at home, but I think they go 0-4, 1-3 at best in those 4 games. And the only team that they really avoided in the SEC this year is Auburn. You know, when you look at the SEC and the 12 teams, they got 4 of the top 5. In my opinion, the only team they really avoided is Auburn. So I don't see them breaking 500. I have them also going 6-6, and I do have them going 4-4 in the SEC. Oh no, hold on. Yeah, here we go. 6-6. 6-6 and 4-4 in the SEC with those 4 losses. I think in a row, if I'm not mistaken, at the Swamp, out of Alabama, and then coming home and playing LSU and Georgia. I just don't believe Tennessee has the talent to win those games. If they do, they'll win one of those 4 and finish 7-5. 7-5 at best. In third, I've got South Carolina, and that probably raises some people's eyebrows. I'm about to tell you why. South Carolina in third. And people are probably like, man, this guy's crazy. I've seen them as low as 6th. It's the consistent pick is somewhere around 4 and 5. I don't think I've seen anybody have them third yet, besides myself. But they've got a really good young quarterback. It's so important in the SEC to have a quarterback, man. Jake Bentley is a sophomore. This kid skipped his senior year of high school, played 7 games last year, and he performed. He's a prototypical quarterback. I believe he's 6'5", 6'6", about 220 pounds, has an absolute gun, and he will definitely be playing on Sundays. I wouldn't be surprised at all if he left after next year, after his junior year. I think he's only 19 years old. He's just a sophomore, but he's talented, and he's going to get better as the year goes on. The big key for South Carolina and why I have them at 3 is their schedule. Out of 12 games, they have 3 road games, 1 neutral site game, either 1 or 2 neutral site games, but they only have 3 true road games, and they're against softer competition. I already talked about Bentley, back at quarterback. They've got, I believe, one of the most, what's the word I'm looking for, most dynamic wide receivers in Deebo Samuel. He's back, which kind of surprised me. I thought he would have left for the league. And then they've got a 3-headed monster in the backfield with Rico Dowdle returning. They also have A.J. Turner. And then they got a transfer from North Carolina in Tyson Williams. So they've got 3 guys at running back that they can just plug in. And that is so huge in the SEC. Fresh legs, man. Fresh legs. They got 3 guys at running back that could start at most schools that they can just plug in and wear defenses out, open the pass game out, or vice versa. They've got the guy that can go to Deebo. They've got another guy on the outside. I can't think of his name right now, but they can open up with the pass to open the run, or they can use the run to open up the pass. It works both ways. So they are talented on that side of the ball. The offensive line should be pretty good. I'm not I want to emphasize this, a Will Muschamp fan at all. Never have been. I think he had a ton of talent at Florida. I think he had a ton of chances to win at Florida, and he didn't do it. Again, I have him picked third. It's strictly based off of they've got a good quarterback. They've got a three-headed monster at running back because of a transfer and returning starters. They've got, I believe, probably an all-SEC second-teamer with Deebo Samuel who can run the ball and catch the ball. They can run him in motion, and he can take reverses. He's really good. He kind of reminds me of kind of like a Hines Ward type player, a little bit bigger, but can do a lot of different things. Is definitely a threat, and defenses will definitely have to pay attention to him, which always helps a young quarterback, along with the run game. On defense, I don't know. They have some question marks. They had a huge drop off from 2015 to last year. They could not put pressure on the quarterback. I think they finished like 92nd in sacks, which is surprising. They had Javion Clowney in 2012 or 2013, who was just a monster off the edge. They had another guy off the edge. They were known for putting pressure on the outside on the quarterbacks. It's just not going to happen. This year, I don't believe. They do get some outside linebackers back that might help, but their offense is going to win the games that they win. I believe that they'll play in a lot of shootouts this year. They play 8 times at Williams-Brice. 7 or 8 times at Williams-Brice, which is just really not fair. That's a tough place to win ball games, no matter how good they are. So that's a huge advantage. They've got 10 back on offense, and then they've got 6 back on D. So they've got 16 guys returning, which always helps in the SEC. Experience is huge. Let's see here. Linebacker, Sky Moore returns. Sky Moore, if I'm not mistaken, don't hold me to this, if I'm not mistaken, he led the team in tackles as a freshman, as a sophomore, and as a junior. So watch out for that name. If people forgot about Sky Moore, he's a very talented, kind of undersized outside linebacker. He's back from injury. I think some people have forgotten about that, how huge that is for a team. And they're going to be putting him next to, I can't think, Bryson Allen Williams. I have my notes here. Bryson Allen Williams on each edge. So hopefully that'll help provide that pass rush that they didn't have last year. If they can improve on the 21 sacks that they had last year, then I believe that will help a lot. They're definitely going to score points. At first, they might struggle a little. To summarize real quick, they avoided somehow on the west side Alabama and LSU and Auburn. They avoided all 3. They avoided Alabama, they avoided LSU, and they avoided Auburn on the west side. I think the only 2 teams on the west they play, I'm not real sure. A huge game for them is the season opener, though. They play they play North Carolina State in Charlotte. That's one of their neutral site games. They might have 2 if I'm not mistaken. That's a big game for them. If they can beat NC State, I think I have them possibly winning 6 or 7 in a row before they go into Florida. Or no, let's see here. Let's see, they get. Yeah, I have them losing 3 out of the next 4. So I have them starting 5-1 or 6-0. NC State would be that one loss, I believe, before they play at UT, at Georgia. They come home. They play Vandy and they play Florida. So I have them losing 3 out of those 4. So they kind of come back to earth. They come back down to earth. They come out of the gate strong, 5-1, maybe even 6-0. If they're sitting at 6-0, they're probably easily in the top 15, probably around 9 to 12 area. And then they go to UT, man. I believe is their 7th game, and I have UT upsetting them. Then they turn around and play between the hedges in Georgia. That's tough back-to-back. So I have UT upsetting them. Then after going to UT in Georgia, they come home and they play... who do they play? They play Vandy and they play Florida. I believe they'll beat Vandy at home. They lose to Florida. And then, of course, they play Clemson to end the year. And so they start out strong. They finish 2-4 on the last half of the season. I have them finishing 3rd in the SEC East, 8-4. And let's see here. And 5-3 in the SEC. So that's kind of my pick. That's kind of my pick that might surprise people. You know, I'm trying to go a little against the grain. Sometimes it's hard because there's nothing there to go against the grain. You know, you gotta have things to support why. Their schedule sets up so nicely with only 3 true road games, 1 neutral site game, which is in the state right north of them. Although the game is against NC State, it's a neutral site. They sell the tickets 50-50. If they win that game, watch out for South Carolina. I believe they can be a team that's talked about a lot early on, and then down the stretch they kind of fall apart because of a really tough schedule. Second place is the shocker.
Georgia. Georgia is not going to win the East this year. Georgia will not win the East, and I can't stand it. I like SEC football, obviously. I cannot stand Georgia. And I'm about to tell you why I have them in third. So, okay, Georgia finishing in second place. I'm going to try to do this quick after the message, so really put on here for a second. They're pretty much the consensus pick. Everybody's saying Georgia versus either Alabama or Auburn. I think Alabama's a no-brainer there. It's going to come down to the iron hole on that side. We'll talk about that in a couple days. But Georgia, I think their quarterback comes back. It's going to come down to October 28th when they play Florida in Jacksonville at the world's largest cocktail party. Kind of like every year. Florida's won the last 2 in a row. If I'm not mistaken, I think Georgia hasn't beat Florida since 2008. If I'm not mistaken, I don't know. But I know Florida's won that 2 years in a row. Jim McElwain is killing it. I love him as a coach. He loses his defensive coordinator. What does he do? He goes out and hires a guy like Randy Shannon, who won national championships out of Miami. Talking about Georgia right now, though. On offense, they do have their quarterback, Jake Eason, back. He's young. He didn't show me a whole lot last year. He's definitely got an arm. He definitely has a backfield behind him. Nick Chubb. And, man, they've got to get back to what we were saying. They have a good two-headed monster. Both of them are playing the league. Both of them are actually supposed to go pro, I think. They decided to stay. So the backfield is good. The offensive line is pretty good. They've got, I believe, 5 coming back on offense. But the defense is where it's at for real. They've got 10 coming back. I believe their defensive line will probably be the best in the country. If not, it'll be top 3 to 5. Linebacking core, again, probably top 3 to 5. If Jake Eason, the quarterback, can just not turn the ball over, if they can get any kind of air game going, any kind of pass game going on, to open up for Nick Chubb, and I don't know why my mind's going blank on who their backup running back is. He's very good. Maybe he will continue. Then that sets things up right. The defense will definitely carry the Bulldogs this year. If Jake Eason can just hang on to the ball, control the clock, score a few points, they're going to win a lot of games. I don't think that's going to happen. I think their schedule's tough. I think SEC defenses are going to put pressure on the young quarterback, and he'll make mistakes, and that'll be why they end up how they end up. To go over, to kind of summarize their schedule, it's really brutal, man. They go not to Florida. They play Florida in the cocktail party on the neutral site.
who almost absolutely destroyed their program. And what do? You go to back-to-back SEC East championships and back-to-back SEC titles. Granted, they've lost both of them, but that's so impressive, man. To come in right away with someone else's guys, win the East and go to the conference championship. So I'll start with the offense. Like I said, they've got a graduate transfer, Malik Zaire, who's a 5th or 6th year senior. It seems like Notre Dame got him 20 years ago. He's eligible. He's an option. I don't know if they're going to go that way. Del Rio's back, and then Felipe Franks is definitely, without a doubt, the future. If you haven't heard that name, I mean, anybody that loves college football knows the name, at least Felipe Franks. He was one of the highest touted quarterbacks coming out of high school. So he's got 3 options at quarterback. He'll figure it out. I don't know who he's going to go with. I think all 3 options are great. I would have Del Rio 3rd probably, and the battle really between Franks and Zaire. That's what I would expect. Franks, the young, talented, possibly even the better option, but you don't want to make mistakes. They've got a good defense. They don't have a whole lot of returning starters, but they're loaded. He's done a good job recruiting. You haven't heard the names yet. You'll hear about the names this year when you watch. Kind of like Alabama. They lose people. They plug them in. That's what Jim McElwain's going to do at Florida. You guys get ready. Florida will be a relevant program as long as he's the head coach. They lose their defensive coordinator to, I believe, Temple, and he gets Randy Shannon. Randy Shannon won multiple national championships, had multiple #1 defenses at the Miami Hurricanes. This isn't a biased pick either, at all. I believe that Florida really definitely has the talent. They've got so many options at quarterback. They have Antonio Callaway back at wide receiver. He could be a first-team guy, definitely a second-team guy, in my opinion. Then they've got T.J. McCoy and Jordan Scarlett at running back, who ran for 1,000 yards. And they've also got LaMichael Farine is back at running back. So they got 2 guys on the outside. They've probably got a guy or 2 in the slot or at wide receiver that we haven't heard of that'll make a name for himself. At running back, they got a 1,000-yard rusher in Jordan Scarlett coming back. And then they've got that 1-2 punch because LaMichael Farine's back as well. On D, they lost, like I said, Jeff Collins to Temple, who's now the head coach at Temple. I think he'll turn Temple around. He's a very good coach. But they get Randy Shannon, who, in my opinion, is a better defensive coordinator. And he'll know what to do. Up front, I believe they'll be pretty strong, and that's where they'll get most of their momentum. Up front, the biggest question mark definitely will come in the secondary, in the defensive backfield. They lost a couple guys to the NFL, so there's some question marks there. But again, Florida is kind of becoming. Don't misconstrue what I'm saying. They're not becoming Alabama, but they're similar. They lose guys, but that's okay. You're going to hear about 6 to 8 guys that you've never heard of on both sides of the ball, and then we'll be talking about them midway through the season and next year. So they're becoming kind of one of those programs like back in the Steve Spurrier games where they lose guys to the NFL and then they just plug in new ones, sophomores and juniors that we haven't really heard of, that haven't gotten a lot of playing time. To summarize everything, the difference in why I think they win the East and what separates them from everyone else is special teams, man. People forget it's not just an offensive and defensive game. Special teams wins games, especially in the SEC, where it comes down to a field goal a lot. You know, you got a tie game, you're down 1, you're down 2, you got 2 minutes to go, and you got to get 40 or 50 yards to get your guy in position. Well, you know, if they're starting at the 50 this year, all they got to do is get a first down, and they're good, because their kicker last year was 21 for 25. His name is Johnny Townsend. He will definitely, most likely, unless there's a guy that I don't know about, he'll win the Lou Groza Award for best kicker at the end of the year. And then their punter was number 1, and he chose not to go to the league. His name is, God, I don't know why all these names are slipping me. I'm sorry, Eddie Pinero is their field goal kicker. Johnny Townsend is the punter. He's the punter. He averaged 48 yards per punt. That's huge in the SEC, and that's what I think will happen. I apologize, guys. So that's how I have it. So I've got Florida going 9-3 and 6-2. 9-3, 6-2. They'll be back in the SEC East Championship. Make it a three-peat. I'll do this one time. It'll be the last time. Florida wins the SEC East. Ace said so. Guys, I'm going to do this every 1 or 2 days. Probably every 2 days. I'll do the SEC West next. Then I'll do the Big 12. I will do the Big 10. I will do the Pac-12. And then I'll do, who am I leaving out? The ACC. I'll do the Power 5 conferences, and then I'll do a quick rundown on the rest of the teams, the Sun Belt, Conference USA, the smaller conferences. I hope everybody enjoyed my video. The final take, SEC East, I've got Missouri going 5-7, 1-7, coming in last. Vandy 5-7, 2-6, Kentucky 5th, Tennessee 4th. My surprise is South Carolina 8-4, 5-3. Georgia coming in a close second. It's going to come down to that game on October 28th in Jacksonville. And then I've got Florida going 9-3, 6-2. Could very easily go 10-2 or 11-1 and really make some noise. But I have them dropping a couple after the Georgia game. I believe they will let down. I don't remember who they play. I believe it's Ole Miss. But they'll let down. They'll lose a couple games, and they'll still end up in Atlanta and have a respectable season. So there it is, everyone. I hope you enjoyed my show. I'll let everyone know when I do it again on my TV Network and Media page. It'll most likely probably be on Saturday. No, it'll probably be Sunday. I'll be very busy. So it'll probably be Sunday, everybody. Thanks, everyone for watching. Butch, Pac-12 will probably be the third one that I do. Real quick before I get off, I'm going to send shout-outs. I can only do it for my personal page. So everybody watching on my TV network and my media page, thank you so much. Unreal, the engagement that I got. I believe I'm at like 330 likes and loves on my previous post. Thank you so much. I really appreciate it.